We're living a time of extremes, from the mysterious fulfillment of ancient prophecies to AI in our world and computer chips in our bodies. It's clear that the rules have changed. To make sense of the emerging world, here's everything you need to know. We are the technology that we've been waiting for. And that's what I want to talk to you about right now. In previous episodes, I have talked to you about human divinity, the power of human divinity, how divinity is only possible through our biology, through the cells of our bodies and the systems functioning the way they were designed to function. Something happened a few years ago that has changed the way that scientists look at the human body. And that something is what tells us to an even greater degree just how powerful, how rare, how precious, how sophisticated we are as biological organisms. And this is coming in a time when our biology and our humanness is commonly denigrated. Our young people in school today are being taught the same thing today that I was taught when I was in school, once again, 50s, 60s, early 70s, is that carbon-based life in general is a flawed form of life, and that humans, as an expression of carbon-based life, that we are flawed as well. Now, I mentioned that in a previous episode, but I didn't really expand on what those flaws are. Among our flaws are things like human emotion. Human emotion is seen by technologists as a flaw because it can sometimes cloud our decision making and our judgment. And I think that's probably true to some extent. However, I wouldn't want to live in a world where we didn't have human emotion, and I cherish the emotions that I experience. Those of you that study astrology, I am a double Cancerian male. Most of my planets are in the 12th house. They're all in the sign of Cancer. Cancer is about emotion, it's about feeling, and it's also about home and nurturing. And all those come together for me in the perfect way because me sharing this information with you is my way of loving you. It is my way, one of the ways that I nurture my community and my global family in a time, once again, where we are being taught that we are a flawed and weak species, a flawed and weak form of life. There are technologists that refer to us as frail forms of life, subject to the frailties of disease and ultimately of death. Well, I want you to know that we are designed to transcend all of those things. You know, the human body now is documented with the ability to heal every organ, every tissue, every gland, every system in the human body is now documented with the ability to stop the damage that is being done, to heal the damage that has occurred, and to reverse that damage. Even organs and tissues we were told could not. Brain tissue, for example, heart tissue, spinal cord tissue, pancreatic tissue, and more. There's a catch, and the catch is that the body has to be given, I'm going to be personal about this, our bodies need to be given the environment that allows them to do what they know how to do. And that's what I want to talk to you about in this episode right now, because we're not what we've been told, and we're so much more than we've been led to believe. Emotion is only one of the flaws. Reproduction is human sexual reproduction is viewed as a flaw because we never know with precision what the outcome will be. You don't know always if it's going to be a boy or a girl. You don't know what the eye color, the hair color, the IQ, if the muscles are going to be fast twitch muscles for athletic performance or slow twitch muscles. We don't know that. The technologists say, we can fix that. We have gene editing. We have artificial conception. Now, artificial wombs are developed, and the FDA proposes that they will approve the artificial wombs within the next 4.5 years, by the year 2030. These are wombs that allow mammals to be conceived and full gestation up to the time of birth. I guess you can, I don't know if we call it birth because they're not coming through a birth canal. But the point is, the technologists say that we now have made human conception obsolete. And so we have fixed one of the flaws. We have the ability now to weed out human emotions. So we've fixed another one of the flaws. What they view as flaws, I view as our humanness, as what we cherish that separates us from any other form of life. When we talk about our humanness, and I speak about this in a live event in front of a live audience, I often have what I call young people. I'm in my 70s now, so these are people that are, in their 20s, maybe teens, 20s, 30s. I consider them young people. And what they say to me is they have been taught that the computers, computer chips, and the AI, this is our future, this is it. That is a natural thing for us to merge with computers, for us to merge our bodies with computer chips, for us to merge our bodies with AI. And I was at a conference recently where the scientists actually looked at me and said, Greg, this is our next step in evolution. And I had to push back on that. I said, no, it is not a natural evolution. And I'm certain of that because when we merge our biology with machines and technology, we lose a part of ourselves that separates us from every other form of life. That is not a natural form of evolution. It is a form of evolution, they're right. It is a forced evolution. It is a an artificial evolution. It's not one that we want. I'm going to talk a little bit more about AI in future episodes. But AI, we want to serve us, not to enslave us. And the way we do that is to have it outside of our bodies, not inside of our bodies, and to have it augment our decisions, not make those decisions for us. But we'll talk about that more later. But the young people, I want to get back to the way they have been taught to think. And I'm just going to give you a couple of examples here. I don't want to be redundant, and I'm going to do this at a very high level. Scientists recently made a comparison, a study between the human brain in whole and a microprocessor. Now, when I first started reading this, I said, how can you possibly make a comparison between a brain and a computer chip? Well, it's very interesting. I think you all have seen enough between my work and my dear friends and colleagues, Bruce Lipton, Joe Dispenza, Len McTaggart, and so many others. When we talk about the brain, you know that between the neurons, there's a space, a gap. It's called a synapse. And that's where you often see in the illustrations, a little spark jumps from one neuron to another through this. They're not touching. There's a little gap in there. That gap is called the synapse. Interestingly, the number of synapses in the human brain, scientists now are equating the synapse of the human brain with the transistors that also massage the electricity, the information on a computer chip. So they're saying that the transistors are the equivalent of the synapses. Interestingly, there's about the same number of synapses in the human brain as there are on our most advanced computer chips right now. So they're able to make these comparisons. And I could share with you all the details of the study, and I do it in our live events. What I'll say to you right now, I'll just say the bottom line. What scientists found is that the human brain is 100-fold more efficient at processing than the computer chips. Now, are the computer chips fast? Yes. Are they efficient? Yes. Check this out. Is the computer chip, how far is it scalable? All right, they're fast, they're efficient, but they can only process, a computer chip can only process up until it reaches, it's limited by the physics of the stuff the chip is made of. If the chip is silicon, then the space between the atoms and the way those atoms are arranged to make the silicon are in themselves a limitation. And once the information, once the processing reaches the limit created by those atoms, it can't go any further. So what we say is that the scalability is finite. So the computer chips, fast, yes. Efficient, yes. Scalability is finite. Now, check this out. Human neurons. Are they fast? Yes. Are they efficient? Yes. They function differently than a computer chip, and in that they are able to triage information and bring it back together. Are they scalable? Well, this is where it gets really interesting, because every time scientists push a human brain, they push the neurons of the brain to what were accepted as limits in the past. And sometimes those limits are published in textbooks and medical books, even for decades. I'll give you an example in a moment. But when they reach those limits, rather than stopping, the neurons do what neurons do. The brains do what we humans do. They morph and they adapt to the new condition and open up an entire new vista of potential, new bandwidths of information. And they do this again and again and again. So as a human neuron, is it fast? Yeah. Is it efficient? Yeah. Is it scalable? And if it is, what is the top end of our scalability? And the truth is, we don't know. Our scalability may be infinite. And I want you to think about that. Our ability to process information may be infinite, because every time we reach the limit, we transcend that limit. Let me just give you a quick example. Again, textbooks, medical textbooks, biology books years ago used to look at the brain, and they said 40 cycles per second, 40 hertz is the fastest that the brains are going to be able to process information. The brain cannot handle, the human brain cannot sustain information above 40 cycles per second. And I have old textbooks that show that, medical books. Tibetan monks came along when we started making connection with those monks in the monasteries and the highlands of central China and Tibet. I had the opportunity, the privilege of leading groups into those monasteries, 12 monasteries and 2 nunneries over periods of time up to 26 days, where we had the opportunity to actually see and experience these monks and the nuns and the processes that they were learning, that they were also teaching. So when they were taken into the laboratory and put into the MRIs and hooked up so scientists could measure what was going on, here's what happened. The monks said, wow, if we do a certain kind of meditation, we can exceed those old limits. So they began doing a meditation, and all of a sudden, they're processing not at 40 cycles per second, but now they're up to 80 cycles per second. And the scientists said, wow, a human brain can't possibly process anything faster than that. Maybe we got it wrong the first time around. Maybe early in the infancy of understanding the brain, maybe we didn't understand this, but human brain can't possibly process more than 80 cycles per second. So the monks said, well, if we do a different kind of meditation, and you know where this is going to go. You all know this. If you've seen my programs, you know what I'm going to say. They were processing 100 cycles per second. And scientists had to have a new brain state now to accommodate that. So they had to change the textbooks, and they began calling this the gamma brain state. And they said, yeah, but the brain can't possibly do any more than that. And then they began processing 120, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 190 cycles, 200 cycles per second. Now look at where that is from what was accepted just a few years ago. Another new brain state had to be embraced. It's called the hyper gamma brain state. And I don't think that is the end. But here's what's interesting. The monks began showing how meditations, certain kinds of meditations, altered states of consciousness, could change the brain processing state on the other end of the spectrum, not from fast processing, but slow. They began processing in meditation less than 1 cycle per second, less than 1 hertz. Now, when we in the past have seen someone with such little brain activity, we've got all kinds of stories that we tell about what's happening with that person and whether or not they have a viable life ahead of them. If they're maybe in a coma, or if they have been traumatized in some way, or certain drug overdoses and things like that. The monks are very conscious, they're very awake, yet they are in an altered state of less than 1 cycle per second. The epsilon brain state is what that now is called. The point of all of this is that when we compare ourselves to the physical technology of a computer chip, which now is beginning to look like primitive technology. And I'm going to tell you why I'm saying that. When we compare us to a physical chip, we are scalable beyond anything that we even know that is what the limits are right now. We don't know the limits of our scalability. We are a highly advanced, technologically sophisticated soft technology, not a primitive hard technology like a clunky computer chip. We're more than that. We are cell membranes, and we are neurons, and we are DNA, and we are processing in ways that we're only beginning to understand. It doesn't stop just with the brain. Let me just run through and give you some examples. Well, we now know the average human, whatever average is, has about 50 trillion cells in the body, 50 trillion cells. Every one of those cells functions as a tiny circuit. I'm just going to tell you a quick story about this. When I was working in the defense industry during the Cold War years as a senior computer systems designer, writing pattern recognition software, the Cold War was a very civilized kind of war compared to, what we've seen in recent years. Because although the governments were at war, the scientific community was still cooperating and still in communication. I mean, we worked with the Russians ultimately, and we built a space station and beyond. So it was during the Cold War that we began seeing, and I was in a community in Colorado at that time, a technical community, and there was exchanges of technical, biological information. It was the first time from a Russian scientist that I saw a human cell equated with an electrical circuit. Now, we're used to seeing that today, but you think about that. We're taught to think of the cells as soft, sticky, gooey, mushy, wet, stuff, biological stuff. Scientists began looking at the human body not from a biological perspective, but from an IT perspective, information technology. And when we do that, it changes everything. Because what we find is that the cells, the organ, the tissues, the glands, the DNA in our bodies, the molecules, all function as equivalents of electrical components that we build in the world outside of us. Except it's inside of us, and in many cases, our capabilities meet and even exceed the capabilities of what we're building outside of us. Well, think about what that means. We're being asked to accept technology into our bodies that in many cases, we exceed those capabilities naturally if we understand our bodies, if we understand our soft technology. All right? So 50 trillion cells in the body, every one of those cells is a tiny, tiny circuit, a little microcircuit. Has an input, output, a gated circuit. Every one of those cells produces a tiny spark of electricity, very low voltage, 0.07 volts of electricity. Now, that's not much. But now you do the math. 50 trillion cells times 0.07 volts. And now you're talking, I'll just do it for you because I've done this so many times in conferences, 3.5 trillion volts of electrical potential. Not realized, but potential volts in the human body. I think this is fascinating because the national debt has only recently reached 3.5 trillion US dollars. So we're living in a time where the debt of our society actually is the same number as the potential, the electrical potential that science has just revealed in the human body. There's a whole conversation we can have about those parallels and those synchronicities. 3.5 trillion volts of electrical potential. What would it mean if you could harness that and apply it to your own healing, or to deep states of intuition, or to deep states of resilience, or to creating longevity in your body, or cognition, super memory, super learning, super cognition, and so much more? Well, you can. And that's the whole point, because we are the technology. But it doesn't stop there, because every one of those cells, in addition to being a circuit, it emits photons of light, particles of light into the world around us, and we receive. We are photon receivers and photon emitters. Well, light is information. We are receiving and transmitting information constantly. The question is, do we know what we're saying? And can we regulate that light to communicate in a meaningful way with other forms of life in the world around us? Well, the answer is yes, or we wouldn't be having this conversation. But it doesn't stop there, because every cell in the body, it stores information just like we do on a chip. We can retrieve information just like we do on a chip. Listen to this. I didn't know if I was going to get to this or not. It was a few years ago that scientists began looking at us from the IT perspective. And I shared that just a few moments ago. That means the discoveries about the human body are not being published in biology books. They're being published in obscure technical journals and really technical language. Very few people, read, or if they do, they're hard to understand. There was a journal that came out on soft computing that literally says that human DNA functions as a fractal antenna. All right, so what's that mean? Antenna tuned to signals, fractal antenna tuned to many signals across a broad bandwidth, a broad spectrum of information. We're pulling in that information. We're receiving that all the time and transmitting that information. It goes on and on and on. All right. We are truly a highly advanced, technologically sophisticated soft technology. Now, the science is telling us we are not the product of natural evolution. Natural evolution did not produce what we have. That implies there's an intentionality underlying our existence. That implies that there's an intentionality regarding us and our ability to use this technology to access our divinity. Everything I'm describing to you in the human body is a part of the process of accessing our love, our forgiveness, empathy, sympathy, compassion, creativity, innovation, imagination, all the things that I've said in the past couple of episodes. This is why you are so precious. This is why you are the prize. This is why your humanness is under attack right now. Because when you are at your best, you are free of the fear that is being used to direct choices and direct perceptions in terms of how you think of yourself and the way you live your life. Your body is the prize. And I want you to think about that. You would not see all of this chaos in the world around you distracting you from yourself if there wasn't something within you that was so valuable it warrants that level of distraction. I want you to think about that. And I know it's a very different way of thinking for some people, and for others, it's right up your alley of what you've always felt. Maybe you've never heard it verbalized. It's important that we verbalize this, because in the next 4.5 years, we will be coerced, we will be mandated, we will be invited, we will be indoctrinated to accept new technologies, not just in the world, but into our bodies. I want to talk to you about this in future episodes. There's a reason for that, and it all falls under the broad umbrella of the ancient struggle between light and dark, good and evil. The goal of the struggle, remember, is to deny you your divinity. When you replace your natural biology with synthetics, it veils your access to your human divinity. I want to give you a reason to think differently about yourselves, and I want you to think about that. I'm going to pick up on it in future episodes, but for now, I just want to thank you for the opportunity, allowing me to share some of these ideas with you and some of the discoveries that our own science is making, because we're not what we've been told. We're so much more than we've been led to believe. And if we don't embrace that, and if we don't embrace that quickly, we're on the precipice of forever losing our humanness and what it means to be human. I think it all comes down to love. The question is, do we love ourselves enough to accept the deep truth of our divinity? Do we love ourselves enough to accept what it means to be human and the responsibility that comes with the power of our divinity? We answer that question through the choices we make in our lives, not with our words, but the things that we do, the way we treat one another, the way that we treat ourselves. And I think that is where I'll close this message for today. All right. Thank you for sharing part of your day with me today. I look forward to our next.